So I don't know how much you know, but the farm dates back to 1685 as part of the Simon van der Stel farm, which was just under 800 hectares of land. And it was subdivided after his death into 3, and then again later into 2 in 1823. And so current Klein Constantia is 146 hectares of land. We go from 70 meters above sea level to just over 350 meters above sea level on plantings. 77 hectares are planted, 63 produced this last year. And we are 90% a white wine farm. 50% of what we do is Sauvignon Blanc. This was our most important vineyard. We pulled it out in May and June this year. Muscat Frontignan. It was 40 years old, which is incredibly old for this area. 25 would be the average plant in this area. And that's because we average about 1,000 millimeters historically a year. And it's winter rainfall. So we are maritime, but we are also Mediterranean as well. So 2/3 surrounded by the sea. So the prevailing winds come off the sea. The northwester blows from over the mountains in the winter, but in the summer it's blowing from behind us or False Bay. And so that cools the yield structure so that the top of the yield structure is 5 degrees cooler than the bottom of the day. So if you're thinking about the Loire and Sancerre, you're thinking 16 degrees on average in the summer. The top yield structure averaging about 19 degrees. On the warmer slopes where the reds are, 24.5 degrees. Originally from France, and it would have come in with the Dutch. And it was one of the plantings that Simon van der Stel planted here, along with Semillon, Chenin Blanc, Crystal Drape, and only one red Contact. So it's always been the Vinsura Constantia has always been made from Muscat Frontignan. And back in the old days, it was just called the Constantia wine, and it wasn't made for about 100 years due to heavy British taxation, emancipation of the slaves. There was a free trade agreement between Britain and France, which made the French wines cheaper. And so the farmers went bankrupt after that, and also the phylloxera plague happened in the late 1800s as well. This is vertical shoot positioning Muscat Frontignan. We've got lovely bunch formations this year, so not too much unruly wind, so the budding and the flowering went really well this year. And we're looking forward to healthy conditions going forward. There was quite a bit of a scare in the Stellenbosch area for mildew this year, but so far in this valley we're pretty much free. So we're looking forward to good harvest, but I mean there's a fire now, so that could be a problem. Well, there is a small break, but these big fires tend to jump the brakes very easily, and if the wind gets up, it will be very problematic. So you can see there's some drip irrigation here, but we haven't actually watered the vine since 2011. We've dry planted and we've dry farmed since then. And we are 100% sustainable on water. We only use mountain water, and we just drove past the purification plant. Almost everything in front of us is Sauvignon Blanc, except for one vineyard of Semillon up to the right-hand side. And then we've got a bit of Riesling here and beyond the trees on the right-hand side as well. You can see we've got our own weather station. We can track everything. The beehives are just for honey. And we've got 2 dams. This is the lower dam. It was built in 2005. And we finished it in May, and it was overflowing by June. So that just shows you how much water we get here. And we got over 30 hectares of natural vegetation on the farm called fynbos. It's the natural vegetation of the area. And it's mainly proteas, heathers, heaths, ericas, and succulents. And we take out alien plant life every year and put back natural vegetation in its place. So we've been a biodiversity champion for the last 25 years. We are quite sustainable, and we try and be as green as possible, but we actually do have 11% of the farm under biodynamic and organic practices. It's pretty much a cool valley. There's 188 hectares of Sauvignon Blanc in this valley in total.
Wine estates would be in this region?
There's 11, and 10 belong to the association. In the dip we've got Chardonnay, and the Chardonnay is for our Cup Classic sparkling wines. It's made like a champenois in the traditional method. So it used to be called Method Cup Classic. Now we call it Cup Classic. Slightly better than saying sparkling.
Sparkling.
We're coming up to the boundary with Cape Nature. So this would be the problem area for us if that fire comes across. And the last time we had to fight a fire over here was in 2015.
Okay.
That year, 5,500 hectares burnt in 5 days. So we split the farm in two. Everyone is fire trained, and we fought the fire day and night. And if you think these trees were high, the flames were higher.
Higher, okay.
So fynbos is very flammable. This is Philly's hill up here. It's named after a tractor driver who in the 80s rolled his tractor down the hill and destroyed it, but walked away without a scratch. And so everyone teased him till we named the hill after him. We're at about 240 meters above sea level.
Right now, okay.
Normally you would see the lovely False Bay, but the smoke from the fire is covering that right now.
What's the situation right now?
It's quite bad. They're evacuating people. Luckily there's not huge amounts of wind at the moment, otherwise it would be spreading really quickly.
What are the major challenges in growing the vineyards?
Baboons. We don't have a frost problem. It never gets below zero here.
Okay.
Wind can be a problem. Birds can be a small problem, but baboons can take out a whole vineyard in a morning. And then above us is our research and development area for Sauvignon Blanc. We have 6 different single blocks up there that we keep separate. We monitor both the vineyard and the winemaking to see how we can understand those vineyards better and make better wine from what we learn. This is all Sauvignon Blanc. You can see if you look back here, we've opened up the leaf structure on the morning sunlight side.
Right.
Get some sun onto the bunches, help with
vegetation.
yes, so we're going to protect the afternoon sun side. But we also want to get some airflow going through, and the southeaster wind's blowing mostly, so it's going to come from this side, give nice airflow so you mitigate any fungal diseases.
3-wire, 7-wire.
This is a 7-wire peril system, yes. Yeah, but it's about the whole farm was replanted in the 1980s when it was apartheid era, so you couldn't get the best possible planting material because there were sanctions. And the Jooste family did the planting back then, and they did an incredible job with what they could get.
Yeah.
But now we want to take it to the next level. So it's about looking after your soils and putting the best planting material in. And we do like to let the vineyard make the wine here at Klein Constantia. So the winemaking, we try and do minimalistic winemaking. So then this is the viticulture store. And there's various implements and tractors and firefighting equipment. We're on minimum staff as of yesterday because it's holidays and the vineyard team's got to get their rest before they have to start harvesting. This is where most of the reds are. These are quite low down, between 90 and 100 meters above sea level. Slightly more northeast facing, so into the morning sunlight, less wind movement. So that's where we're going to get 24.5 degrees a day on average, and our best chance of ripening reds.
Yeah. And the lowest to the sea level you mentioned
70.
was 70.
So good afternoon. My name's Alan Wickstrom. I run the tasting centre at Klein Constantia Winery. Nice to have you here today with us after your long travels. I'm going to take you through some of our wines, but we're going to focus mainly on Sauvignon Blanc. So we're going to do 3 different Sauvignon Blancs. And we have a second farm in Stellenbosch that only does red. So we'll do a red from here versus a red from Stellenbosch. And it's quite nice to do that so you can see how temperature affects how the wine develops. And then we'll finish off with something a little bit sweeter, which we're really famous for, the Vinsura Constantia. That's 100% Muscat Fontenay. So we start with glass number 1, which is in the modern era our most important wine and what we mostly make. It's the Estate Sauvignon Blanc. This is a 2022 vintage, which was a moderate to warm year with a couple of cool days in December and January. And we harvested from 42 different vineyards, but we actually picked 53 times. So some of the vineyards we picked in segments, and we kept everything separate. Most of the vineyards underwent skin contact for 24 hours before mostly a natural ferment, 80% naturally fermented. And then 6 months fine leaf contact in mostly stainless steel, but 10% went into bigger, older, neutral barrels. In the vineyard, there's lots of different aspects to the yield structure, plus elevation changes, plus soil changes. So not one vineyard produces exactly the same. But in general, you'll get probably from the top of the farm maybe a little bit more greener fruit coming through. If it is all afternoon sunlight side especially, but morning sunlight side would be slightly riper and maybe a little bit more stone fruit. Lower down, you'll get some of the tropical tones coming through. Then all that salinity is that decomposed granite I was talking about. So that's from all over the place, but then glass number 2, the Matisse, is specifically from Philly's Hill and between 200 and 300 meters above sea level, but both morning and afternoon sunlight exposure. But poorer soil, so accentuated minerality, and this kind of finer fruit characteristics coming through, probably reminiscent of something from Sancerre. And here the maturation is much longer. It is 12 months and 20% is in barrel, the rest in stainless steel. So this is the collaboration project I said we do with Pascal Jolivet. So the Protea is for us and the French Iris is for them. And Matisse means the coming together of two different cultures. So it's a great collaboration that started in 2012 with our winemaker Matthew Day going there to do a harvest. And Pascal took him around the vineyards and made him pick up stones and lick them and eat the fruit, and then took him into the cellar and made him drink the wines from the different vineyards. So you can understand how each microclimate, each part of the micro terroir changes the wine completely. And then he invited their winemaker here in 2013, and they made a tank together, and we've never looked back ever since. Talking about the paddeblocker, that means horse's block. So it was plowed by 2 Percheron horses in the 80s because the hills are steep up there and we didn't have the terracing in, so the tractors kept on falling over while plowing. So to save the tractors, we used horses instead. Now, of course, we've got terracing in place, so we don't need to use horses, but we still do. It's a lower impact into the vineyard, so it's nice for sustainability. The paddeblocker, one single vineyard, but we often pick it in 3 different segments because it's got 3 slightly different hill facings. And this will be 100% naturally fermented. It is 9 months in barrel. It's mostly older barrels, but there is some new barrels as well, 500 litre, and it's going to be more of a masculine type of white wine. So you'll see there'll be a lot more weight on the palate. On the red side, we're going to be tasting wine that is grown 60 kilometers apart. 5 to 10 degrees difference in temperature a day and different soils. Limited sunlight hours this side, a lot more sunlight hours on the Stellenbosch side, probably 3 hours more sunlight a day. So it makes a big difference. So remember here we've got the influence of the granite and the decomposed granite and the Table Mountain sandstone. When it comes to Holkar glass number 5, it's going to be influenced mainly by coffee clip, or in English that would be ferrocrete, which is a clumpy mineral soil, which is great for Cabernet actually. And they do have little bits and pieces of granite and sandstone as well. There is a slight declination in yield facing towards us, so towards the afternoon sun. They do get breezes in the afternoon, but they are quite protected by the Hottentots Holland, so it deflects most of the wind, so we'll get a lot more wind than them. So that's part of the reason why they're warmer a day as well, which means they're going to have much riper characters, a lot more bigger tannins coming through, much darker fruit as well, a lot more density to the wine. It is a slightly more Cabernet than Syrah, with a hint of Petit Verdot. We have got Vinsura Wines, a 2020 vintage in the glass. This is what we historically known for, and we're in the Vinsura Wines cellar, the modern Vinsura Wines cellar, surrounded by 4,500 litre foudres, which the wine spends 1.5 years up here in it, and then 1.5 years downstairs in it, in 500 litre barrels, and it's mainly French oak. But it's a long process before it gets there. We start in the vineyard and normally start picking early February. We'll pick a greener component, and then we'll switch to bunches that are half greener and half raisined and various degrees of raisined. And after that, we'll switch to individual berries. And the berries we'll just harvest one color a day. And each color has its own fruit profile, its own sugar level, acid level, pH balance. It's unique. and we keep all those components separate throughout the fermentation and maturation. And we could pick as many as 30 different components in a year between the beginning of February and the end of April. Depending on the season. If it's a warmer season, it'll be a shorter picking season, and we might only pick 20 times. In a cooler year, it's going to be a longer picking season with a lot more pickings. And, so the accuracies of the utmost, so just the top 20 pickers pick for the Vinder Constans. And then after the maturation phase, it's the job of our blending committee to analyze what components we have and put it together over probably a 3-month period into hopefully the best dessert wine in the world.
So welcome to Strandveld Vineyards. I'm Ottilia. I'll be taking you through a few of our wines today. So the biggest thing about Strandveld Vineyards are we are the most southern vineyards in Africa, and we're located all the way down in the Cape Agulhas region. So cool climate wines. I've chosen 4 wines here from which we are quite well known for. Sauvignon Blanc Syrah is our main focus due to the cool climate. For those of you who don't know the area, we get a lot of wind. So here you learn to love the wind. You can't hate it, then you can't stay here. So wind is here about 90% of the time. And if we do have a nice quiet day like today, then we all immediately go for a jog or a run that evening. So we've got about 6 soil types, mainly coffee clip, which we grow our Strandveld Pofadderbos in. Okay. It's only made from 2 specific blocks. And it's one of the wines we're very well known for. Mm-hmm. So production is very little. We are a small farm, so Strandveld Pofadderbos we make between 15,000 and 20,000 bottles, depending on the harvest of that year. Okay. So we started our first sighting range to carry us through. That's more bulk production that we do to our chain stores and things like that. It's still a very good quality wine, so I'm going to start you off with that. So back in the day, where there was quite a lot of shipwrecks, people that started living in the area were people from these wrecks, and they were called Strandvelders, as they got stranded, and then they started living here in the veld. Okay. And then the area became Strandveld. Okay. And when we started, we was first called ourselves Agulhas Wine, and then one of the owners said, "But why don't we call the wine Strandveld?" And we started doing research to see if there's any trademarks against the name, and it was still available. So we changed the name to Strandveld Vineyards. Okay. So the Strandveld runs all the way from Gansbaai up into the Wip. So the whole area is called Strandveld with all the shipwrecks along the coast. So it comes from the first inhabitants of the area that started farming and living around the coast. Not really. Okay. So we've got a small, say 10 hectares that we sell to another winery, and all the rest of the vines on our farm is used for ourselves. Okay. And then there's quite a few people that actually makes wine in the area, but they don't have tasting rooms. Okay. So we're only 4 or 5 that's got tasting rooms, but altogether we're about 10 farms that produce this wine. And we call ourselves the Agulhas Wine Triangle. So the best way to actually taste all of our wines is to keep an eye out for the Agulhas Wine Triangle Festival, because then the people, even though they don't have wine tasting rooms, they'll be at that event and you can taste the wine there as well.
And approx how many wineries would be in this particular region?
About 10 to 12.
10 to
Yeah.
12.
So not everyone joins the project, but they're all about 10, and we're trying to get more to get involved with the project as well.
Yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc and Syrah is the main focus of the area. There has been some farms and ourselves that has experimenting with other things like Chardonnay, Pinotage, Merlot. But so far the vineyard of the vines that stood out was all Syrah and all Sauvignon Blanc. We've now recently started experimenting with a little bit of Albarino as well, which is a Spanish grape, which so far looks good. So hopefully the production will become bigger soon.
It's a white variety?
It's a white, quite fruity white variety, but it also normally gets a bit oat. So we mainly focus on wine tastings, and we're open 6 days a week. We're only closed on Sundays, and then we've got 2 cottages. That's on weekends we're mostly fully booked. People wanting to get out of the city, or wanting to explore the wine region a little bit. But then with the midweek bookings has also started picking up, especially with tourists now. So we've got the wetlands that we are actually also part of. It's called the Niviarivier Wetlands. So you can actually book a game drive with them, and they've started to reintroduce all the animals and game that was in the area back in the day. So they're only open in summer times. During the winter it's too wet and they can't do tours. So all the wine farms have started to incorporate with them. So you can't book with us, you have to book directly with them. But then they've got hippos and kudu and quagga, ostriches. There's quite a variety. But yeah, that's a fun extra that you can add to the area. And then most people coming to the area want to go to the most southern point at Cape Agulhas, which is about 40 kilometers from here. So a lot of the tourists that we get, they will be coming from Gansbaai, where they do the shark cage diving. It's about 60 kilometers from us. On their way, do a nice stop for wine tasting, and then head over to Cape Agulhas from here. So a lot of the time we're more of a midday, mid-stop break from the long journey. We do about 60% export, so a lot of European export that we do, and then the rest is sold across South Africa. We've got warehouses in Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town, to make it easier for the consumer buying online to quickly get the wine to them. We can't produce sweet wines at all in the area because our cool weather starts quicker than the rest of South Africa. So here by mid-March, say around the 20th of March, then our rain season starts again, and winter is basically here. So we try and finish our harvest by then.
End of Feb.
And normally end of March.
End of March.
Yeah. So our grapes would only be, most of them, especially the red grapes, will only ripen in the beginning of March, and that's if we are lucky. So we hope that everything ripens in time before the rain comes. So sometimes it can be a bit of a rush, quick harvest to get them down before the big rains comes. But they have the characteristics and the climate for botrytis to form has never been. So that's why we don't really focus on the sweet wines. We rather do the dry, classic style wines, and a lot of similar to the Rhone Valley of France. And a lot of our Sauvignon Blancs reminds people of New Zealand style of Sauvignon Blanc. So Conrad, our winemaker, is quite well known for the Strandveld Pofferbos. He's last year November, his 2021 vintage got Diners Winemaker of the Year with Sauvignon Blanc, and now his 2022's got 5-star platter, and so far the 2023 is doing quite well as well. We've basically just released this wine, but already showing beautiful minerality and green characteristics coming through as well. So this wine we release a little bit later. So in South Africa, a lot of wine farms will release their Sauvignon Blancs around April, May. It will be their first wine to release after harvest. When we try and push it to release a bit later in the year, as there's quite a lot of high acidity coming through, and we just want that to settle in the wine. And we feel actually our Sauvignon Blanc drinks at its best just before we go over to the new vintage. So Our Sauvignon Blanc of the cool areas in South Africa also ages very well. We've aged our Strandveld Bos for 7 years, 6 years, and it actually was still very, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Chenin Blanc is now one of those grape varieties that doesn't like our weather and our wind and our weather conditions here in the Strandveld. So they're a bit more to the warmer climates of Paarl and Wellington where they flourish. In the Swartland, the coastal region of the Swartland, and you get more of our characteristics again.
Yeah.
And there's a few wineries that I've actually sometimes I will buy just to check, because say we make a Syrah and with some vintages they'll pick up similarities from that coastline and our coastline in the same vintage wines. So now I'm going to take you over to the Navigator, which is one of our flagships. It's a Rhone Valley style blend. So the name the Navigator actually comes from Prince Harry the Navigator, who sponsored the seafarers back then to come around en route to India to get spices. So it was called the Spice Route.
Yeah.
And they actually got lost in a storm.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know the story about Bartholomeus Diaz. So he came around the coast, and he was actually thinking he was coming around Cape Point, and they were coming around Cape Agulhas.
Okay.
And they got lost in a storm, and then someone saw the land, but they thought they were at Cape Point. So they came, and they tried to find a space where they can actually go on, and they couldn't find a space. So that's why they say the name Agulhas, it means Cape of Needles. So they say it's because of the sharp rocks, and they couldn't find a place to land. And they continued, and they actually got to Mossel Bay where they planted their cross. So by actually finding the land here, they were able to get back on course. And that's also our first sightings name. So it comes from land at first sighting.
Okay.
So the Navigator we called after Prince Harry the Navigator. And it's a Rhone Valley style blend of mostly Syrah. Then we add a little bit of Grenache, Mourvedre and Viognier. So about 20% Grenache, 20% Mourvedre, and a 10% of Viognier. It's aged for 20 months in French oak, about 30% new oak that we'll use, where the rest is then second and third fill barrels. Yes, at this stage we're about between 60 and 70% on white wine production. So our white wine production is still a lot bigger than our red wine production.
So what's most of the challenging part in the vineyard and this side of doing the grapes?
So the weather conditions definitely. Like I said, we can get extreme weather conditions. And the wind actually plays a big role, so it can have negative and positive impacts on our grapes. So when we do have grapes on the vine, we get a lot of mist coming from the coast. Then we want the wind to come and take that mist away to avoid diseases and insects and everything growing on the grapes. But then when the grapes are just forming and we get these hail and windstorms, it knocks off the grapes and the leaves that's protecting the grapes, and then we get a very low yield again. So here's the irrigation dam, and then the 3 of the blocks that's on the opposite side of the dam is Sauvignon Blanc, and we use that for our Pot for the Bos Sauvignon Blanc, and then the bottom left is Syrah. So the dam is nice and full after all of the rain. So a lot of our cottage guests will also come up and they'll do some bass fishing or swimming in the dam if they'd like. There's some canoes at the picnic spot if they want to. 16 to 19 years old. And we're struggling with this block now with dead arm disease. So you'll see some of them have died down. They're not growing anymore. So what we need to do now is we have to replace them, and then slowly, so there will be some very old vines with younger vines in between. And the strange thing is, the first block on the left side is Syrah. This disease is not doing anything to our Syrah vine. So it's only attacking our Sauvignon Blanc. So porphyra, I think you know, is a type of snake. And yes, we do have a lot of them. We've got a lot of mice living in the root of the vines, especially in these blocks. So the porphyras come for the mice. And even if we do find at the offices or something, we'll come and release them here in this area. So it's our natural way of getting rid of the mice that's eating our roots of our vines. That is pine. It's actually not part of our fynbos. We're busy taking them out. These colorful flowers you see
Yeah.
at the front is pin cushions. That's part of the fynbos and part of the protea family. So they're the only protea that blooms this time of the year in the hot summer. Most proteas bloom from March into the winter area.
Okay.
And the Cape sunbird absolutely loves them. So we normally warn people as well when they book, they must fuel up and stop at the supermarket because the closest supermarket is 30 kilometers away. The closest petrol station is 30 kilometers away.